On to the speaker. Thank you so much.
All right, let's get started. My name is Tim, and I am really excited to be speaking at this conference. And so today, my talk is about the modern digital pipeline and how the future of the Jamstack is composable. Well, that's a whole bunch of fancy words, and we'll get into that. But first, let's talk about who I am for a second, because maybe some of the audience doesn't know me just yet. So my name is Tim Bennix, and I am the Principal Developer Advocate at Uniform. And you can probably hear of my accent that it's not native English. I'm actually born and raised in Amsterdam, but now I live in France. So it's kind of a weird mixture of things. So I'm sorry if that's a bit jarring, but anyways, I'll have to continue now. And so I am quite busy and active in our community. And I am a Nuxt.js ambassador. I am a Cloudinary MDE, and I'm part of the technical council of the Mac Alliance. And in my past, I worked at agencies my whole career. So I've worked on all these huge brands. And this is not really to brag about, hey, I worked at these brands. It's kind of like to show how many problems we've had with these brands at scale with the tech we had back in the day when I worked for these brands. Now that I'm in startup land and more our community land and the Mac Alliance stuff and all the new tech, you can see we were actually really trying to work with these brands with this modern tech back in the day. And it was just really hard. And now everything is more normalized. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in this talk. And I'm hoping that some of my ex-clients are actually watching this, and hopefully they can adapt the stuff I'll be talking about. So in this talk, we will look at the future of composable architectures and the future of the Jamstack. And the Jamstack, that name is, what it means is changing quite a lot lately. And so there's many flavors of it. And now with Nuxt 3 and Remix and others, those flavors and the spectrum of Jamstack is widening. And so I'm going to be doing a little story about these two subjects. And then we're actually going into the code, and I'll show you through code what these different flavors are and how you can kind of manage your composable architecture in the front end and in the back end, and have everybody be happy about how that works. So let's talk about the architecture dilemma that we're seeing at the moment. Because building a tech stack from headless products doesn't actually mean that you're ending up with a composable architecture, right? These headless products give you the potential of them connecting up nicely, but actually they aren't, right? It's kind of up to you. You are the composer of your technical stack, of your composable stack, right? And so basically to do any sort of integration between systems and your front end and that content editors are happy, it's really hard to do. And basically to do good composability, these integrations need to be very easy to set up. But the hardest thing to build is easy integrations. And so this is what happens a lot nowadays, right? If you do it wrong, you get this mess of cables. And the management of these cables is really tricky, right? How do you know which thing is connected to what and how the front end deals with it and how do content editors actually change something? It's really tricky to set up something at scale with composable architecture. And so basically as developers, you're doing these things, right? So you have actually selected a collection of tools that you love. You selected based on most likely some technical decisions, right? And so you chose them from multiple vendors, but you kind of interconnect them to make it all work. And because of them, they're indivisible. And so it's really hard to, change one out or do a new thing. And so what happens all the time is actually people re-platform. But didn't the mock tools and the composability say you don't have to re-platform anymore because everything is nice and small? Well, that's pretty painful truth that it's actually really hard to deal with. And so what people start to do is building this kind of systems, right? This looks quite traditional, the CMS in the center and everything around it connected into it. But what if you have multiple CMS instances because you have global and local stuff? And how does commerce fit into your personalization and how does that go to the front end? And it all starts to get interconnected and indivisible. And it's just challenging, right? And so it's almost like you're doing Legos with glue. And I know some people love to make monolithical Lego pieces with glue so they don't come apart again. But in the technical world, in our space, we don't want that, right? We want flexibility and ever-changing things. So basically what we want to be going for is real composability. And that's kind of what we're trying to illustrate here. Right? It's again a collection of tools that you select from multiple vendors that are connected but divisible. And this is kind of where I work at Uniform. This is what we're all about. Right? There is a much cleaner separation of concerns and connections to make sure you can actually change things out really easily without even changing your front end or having the content editors notice differences, right? And so we want this. And I'm about to show you some stuff in code, how you actually get here from multiple angles, from content editing perspective, but also from front-end development or from however you code your stuff. And so we haven't actually spoken about that Jamstack bit, right? So let's go. And actually this image is my Photoshop skills, but you can see it's a while back because Jam is still spelled with the capitals, but it still fits. And I'm living in France, so bon moment is a fun one to add in. Anyway, so let's talk about the future of the Jamstack. And I think it's going to be purely magical. It's going to be super awesome. And so basically nowadays, everything you use is API first, right? And all the magic actually happens on the CDN. And there are no more origin servers. And an origin server is basically a place where everything gets together, is connected to, that knows how to render a page. And so for personalization, you go back to your origin server, you think, okay, what kind of user is this? Okay, which components do I get now? And let me just render it at runtime. And that is the old system. And we don't really have these anymore because all these different services we connect to are API first. So you're going to have to do the things on the CDN. And so even though Jamstack and its spectrum of how it works is quite wide ranging now, that still fits this paradigm really, really well. And so wherever you sit on that Jamstack spectrum, tools like Nux3 or Remix or even Next.js nowadays and a few others, they have you covered, right? And you can do a lot of lovely mixes of whatever your requirements are. You can do fully static, which probably works for like 95% of websites all over the world, right? You can also do a hybrid, right? Some static, some SSR. Or you can just do edge-side rendering on the edge with edge workers. There's many approaches here. And so let's talk a little bit about how Uniform actually works. And after that, we'll dive into the code and I'll show you. All right, so basically in Uniform, there's a few bits and pieces that we work on in your digital pipeline. Right, so one of the bigger ones is that we want content editors to be happy. We want them to not have to know what all these integrations do. And so we have created a no-code or low-code interface called Canvas. And in Canvas, you can have literally an empty canvas. You can make compositions with different headless sources. So you can see here on the screen, we have CMSs, we have commerce, we have a whole bunch of different things. And people that are not super technical can actually work with these things, drag and drop them, and it kind of just works. And then they can hit preview, and then on the front end, things come out. So that's the content editor's perspective. So now a little bit more technical, you have this no-code thing. So you can query that composition based on a slug or an ID. And then what you can do through the SDK that Uniform offers you is you can actually grab all the information that Uniform stores. And it doesn't actually store much. It's only pointing to the sources. So it's only IDs basically. And then we offer you ways to query all that data, then to map that data to your front-end component, and then to run it. And that is actually a pretty interesting bit here. That's like a very nice middleware API layer, which allows you to query the stuff that you get from the composition, then map that data, and then give it to your front end. Which means if in Uniform you select another integration from CMS A to CMS B, the only thing you'll have to change is that data mapping in the code. And suddenly another CMS is working and the front end is no different. And content editors don't really notice the difference because it's so nicely orchestrated and integrated. So, and then it goes to the CDN, and then you can do a whole bunch of things with serverless functions or edge compute or just keep it static and whatever you want. So, how about we dive into the code and I'll show you. And so what you should know before I actually do that, this is bleeding edge stuff. I'm using Nux3, which is still a release candidate at the moment. They're at RC6, so it's going quite fast, so it's getting more stable. But in the end, I'm also going to actually deploy things to the CDN edge. So we're going to go to Netlify and we're going to go to Cloudflare. And both of these are not super stable, and especially combined with Nuxt, and the fact that the SDK packages for Uniform are also still alpha at the moment of recording. They'll go live in a week. They're all good. So the moment you see this, you're good. So if something goes wrong, I have now caveated it. And now I hope the demo gods will be nice to me. All right. Oh, that's the thank you screen. We're not there yet. So this is Uniform. And so let's go into this interface for a second, and then we'll go into the code. And so in Uniform, you can actually see, let me just go to my integrations here. So I have selected a few integrations into Uniform. So I have BigCommerce for commerce-related things, obviously, Contentful, Uniform Canvas, that's like the orchestration no-code system I just spoke about, and I have Netlify as an edge selected, but there's many, many more. And there's many more to come, and you can also make your own if you want to. So if you're interested in that, talk to me later. So anyways, we actually have a composition here. And so this composition currently is empty. The only thing I've done is I've made a component that is our composition, and it has a little title, and it has 2 slots. And so slots are basically buckets you can add other components in. And in Uniform, these components are configured in Uniform, and they point to external sources. So this is not a CMS. It only points to things and it helps you orchestrate. So let's do nothing here and just hit preview so we can see what's happening. And this is running on my local host against Nuxt 3. So let's just go side by side for a second. Well, let's just change something and hit, let me just type it correctly though, and then hit save, and you will see that change. You see, it just went to is very awesome. Or we can just go back to the nerdy variation of it, hit save, and we are back. So this is done with WebSockets, and it works across different sources. So we are not tied to Uniform's SDK to make this happen. And so when I now add new things in here, you will actually see that reflected on the screen. And in this little demo, on the left side, you have JSON. Just the rest, this is basically the representation of what comes out of Uniform here. So when I actually here look at view source, you see this is the JSON that comes out of Uniform. And this is what comes into the front-end app. And then on the right side, we're rendering things. So now we have done nothing. Let's actually go into the code and have a look at what that looks like. So this is the code. This is my Nuxt config, which is quite empty. I've only actually added some CSS for these 2 panels. And then I have the Uniform Nuxt module that has a few properties from my environment variables. And there's some public config stuff to be able to query Contentful and BigCommerce. And so these are read-only API keys. So they're not writing, it's just reading. And so let's go to our page. And so you can see there's a few things that I have commented out because that's for next steps. And I'm not that good at typing. So I'd rather uncomment and comment than type full things because you'll be here for a long time if I have to. So what we have done here is actually we have a Nuxt app that says use composition, which is a composable, as how we call them in Viewland and in Nuxtland. And so we actually query for the slug. And currently the slug is nothing. Because if we look here, the slug is literally just slash. Right here, there's the slug for you. And so we're querying the home page. And then we get that composition. And we make that a computed value. And it goes into a composition component of Uniform. And what these do, we don't go in too much now. But if you want to know more, you can always reach out. And so for now, this is still, there's not that much to it. Right, so how about we add a little component here and then see how we can make that show something. So let's add a hero, and you can see here, this is the Contentful icon, because this hero is actually connected to Contentful. And so when I hit save now, here on the left side, once this is saved, you'll see extra information popping up. So we actually have contentful entry, and the ID is this one. So you can see what comes out of uniform. When I actually look at the source here, we have not saved anything of contentful, just point to it. So now that we have this in our code, how do we actually get the real data from contentful? And this is where that like middleware API layer comes in that I just spoke about before, which is basically something we call enhancer. So we are enhancing our composition. So first of all, let's actually comment this one out because there's no component rendering at all here. And here, this one has a little more. So let me just uncomment some things. All right, so what this does now, let's see if it works first. Okay, so stuff is starting to change now. So let's go to the code and talk about this. So basically, we still have our title here that comes from the composition, but I've also added a field set, and that's just done because it has nice borders, so you can really see how the things work. And inside, I have something that's called slot content with name component. So this references to the slot we have in the uniform composition. So if we look at that, here there's the component slot with this hero component in it. And so through the magic of our SDK, it actually sees, okay, in this composition, there's a certain component that I need to render. And so it's using something we call the resolve renderer to be able to know what to render. And that function is actually here in our components. And here I literally just load my hero and my product view files. And I'm just mapping it. So if the composition says, hey, the type of component is hero, this one will just return, hey, I have a hero. Let's just render it. And so that's what you see here, right? So this component hero is now being rendered. However, it still doesn't have the information. And so that component, you can actually see the hero here. There's actually a few computed props here, but they're not being used at the moment because we don't have the information yet from contentful. So it's literally just this pre-tag that does some stuff, but there's nothing beautiful about this because it doesn't have the data yet. So let's add some data. And the way we do that is I have made another composable called use enhance. So we have these enhancers. So this one is going to be enhancing. And so we don't need the composition this way because we're going to get the composition back through the enhancer. So let's have a look at what that enhancer actually does. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. And so let's first see, okay, so it works, which is always good to know. So on the left side, all the JSON has now been updated. And in the component, in this hero component, you can actually see that this information is here. And so there's lots of information here. And we actually don't want all that stuff because you can see there's still no nice rendering of these computed fields that I just had. Because when you connect to any sort of CMS, whatever data comes back is always native to that CMS. And in this case, you can see that in Contentful, you have all this sys and space and environment stuff and locales and fields and all these things. And actually, you want your front end to be stupid, right? Because next year you want to use the same components somewhere else. So this is why we build these enhancers. So the first enhancer, the contentful enhancer function, is actually something you get from the uniform NPM package, will query your stuff. So let's quickly look at that. It's literally very simple. We have the contentful package. We create a client to connect to Contentful through our runtime config from Nuxt. And the only thing we do is, okay, we have this client now, we give it to the Contentful enhancer function from Uniform, and this guy will query for you. It does all the things you need. And that's when you get back all that information. But we wanted to clean that up, right? Because we want to cable manage our stuff so our front end is completely separated from our back end and the data stays the same everywhere. So actually I can comment this out because I have another version that works. And I need to put the comma here. Yes. So what you can do, you can actually compose these enhancers, right? So we have composed from the first one, it queries the stuff, and then it gives the result of that queried stuff to the next enhancer. And this one is called Contentful Model Cleaner, which is in that same file. And this one literally grabs the parameter with its value, right? So that's the parameter value from Contentful is going into this component or into this kind of model cleaner, and I'm doing really simple things here. You might not want to do this in real life, but for the demo, it really works, right? I just grab the title and the image from all the fields. I don't need all the other stuff. And I'm returning just the title and the image. I just go in deep and pray to the gods of the demos that this URL field is filled. Of course, I know it's filled. Otherwise, I wouldn't code like this. So this basically cleans up all your data. And so now when we save this and refresh the page here, suddenly stuff happened, because if you look at the JSON that now comes back, it's much cleaner, right? Because I only need these two. And the beauty of this is now that this JSON is much cleaner and there's much less going to the client. Because when you need to hydrate your page, if there's a whole chunk of JSON somewhere, that all needs to go into the state of the page so the hydration works. That means a lot of data is going over the wire to be able to hydrate, even if you don't use it. For this one, I just needed the title and the image. We needed Steve Ballmer. That's it. Okay, so this kind of looks like a big-ass wrapper around Contentful. And of course, that's a little bit overkill. And it's actually much more than that. So let's start adding another headless source into this, do the same type of code, and see how nicely that works, especially also for the content editors, right? So let me just add a product. So I have a product component that has a parameter that goes to BigCommerce. And you see, this looks exactly the same as selecting a CMS item. Now this is a bit more rich because it has little images and stuff like that. And so now I have selected a product. So let's save and see what our preview gives us now. So we have now another product here. So in the slot products, something came up. And you can see that the component already started rendering, but uniform only points to a product ID. There's nothing else. So now in our front end, let's query that. So here we have the product ID 113. Well, remember we have these enhancers, right? So we have the BigCommerce enhancer here. And then this needs to go, and that should work. Yep, there we go. Let's refresh. Somehow there's something double here. Oh, we did it. This was basically Nuxt mix behaving combined with our preview with WebSockets that probably did something to double that component. Anyways, I refreshed, we're good. And so now you can see all this information that came from BigCommerce. That's kind of cool, but I don't really need all of it, right? Like the URL zoom for the image, I kind of want it differently. So I made yet another composable, or not composable, enhancer. So BigCommerce is here. So this is a very simple one where I just make a BigCommerce client. That is the data that is fetched. And this one needs some include fields to get the right information, which is this guy here. And then let's also clean the model here. So I want to just get the standard back for the image. So let's go back and comment this one out again and add this one in. So now we're starting to compose with these enhancers. And then let's refresh and beam, there we have it. So we completely simplified the data and here's our stuff. And so in your front-end code, this component just knows a few props that comes in that it wants to use. It doesn't know that it's actually BigCommerce at all. And in your backend, the content editor doesn't really know, hey, I'm doing products with specific BigCommerce stuff. I don't know what to do. Like if I change this now to Commerce Tools or Shopify, the experience is identical. And there's a lot more stuff you can do in Uniform to like query multiple products or multi-select some things or do different languages. There's a whole bunch of fun stuff there. And I'll go into that in a sec. But first, what I want to do is kind of show you one of these flavors of Jamstack. How about we just deploy this now to Netlify and let's do a static rendering. Just like this is a nice flavor. Let's go and actually go to my terminal and say, okay, Netlify build. Here we go. So it's now going to be building this. And we're going to just output it to the edge, but as a static site. So it's just a Netlify site. So it's doing a few things, and then we can do Netlify deploy for production. Let's do it. So let's run this thing. And you might possibly see a URL that I have for another conference. It might be happening. This is all live, so it's all good. Oh, yeah, there you go. But that's fine. It still works. And so what we built now, this is actually a pretty simple form. This is basically just a Jamstack side of the thing. And it works really well, and it's extremely fast. Right? Because we know this. And then without JavaScript, it works. It's all good. So this is super fast. But there's much more fun stuff to be had. And so what I actually want to do is add some personalization to this and then make sure that that personalization is super dynamic, right? But just as fast as just rendering it as a static site. So we're going to add a flavor of Jamstack, which is basically a statically rendered page with a few dynamic bits that are streamed in through an edge handler in Netlify. So let's just close this bad boy again, and let's start to add some personalization business in Uniform. And so I've already prepared a page because otherwise it's lots of clicking. So just go back and let's just, for the moment, remove this one because we don't need it anymore. And then let's go and actually use our personalized page here. And I'm just going to make sure that this goes to / and actually save and publish this thing. And so let's have a look of what I did. And let's actually make this big so it's easier to see. So basically what I've done is we have a default hero banner, which is the developers, right? The one we just saw with Steve Ballmer. But then when there is a signal that you are in fact interested in React, I've actually now loaded a React developers hero. And when there's a signal that you actually like Vue, there's a Vue developers hero. And so this is relatively easy to add. And you can add lots of different things for personalization in Uniform. So let's have a quick look at that. And so basically, because I've integrated with Netlify on my account here, I actually have a whole bunch of other things as well. Like it can tell me through the CDN my country name, things like that. But for now, I've kept it simple and I've added Vue developers and React developers as campaign pages. So basically, this is a query string with UTM interest equals Vue. And so basically, people would click on these links when there's like a tweet that says, hey, cool stuff about Vue.js. You click on it, so you have an action and you say, hey, Vue.js is interesting for Tim's website. Let's go there. And because you put that action in, I know you like Vue.js. But if you had clicked on the React link, I know you like React. So I can do different things based on that. And so what we see here is that if a certain score is actually present for React developers, I'm going to show React. But then if a certain score is there for Vue, I'm going to show Vue. So let's actually publish this. And now let's just go and see if it burns. And I'm going to directly push this to Netlify and see if it actually is going to do something that we want. So let's do a Netlify build. So now it's going to build the whole thing. But it should also actually download our personalization. And I'm wondering if I did that. Yes, I did. It actually found our manifest here, which is a manifest with the configuration for the personalization. Okay, we did it. And now actually let's deploy this bad boy. Okay, this takes a sec. There we go. It's building some edge functions. And it's pushing some stuff. Let's have a look. All right. So now we have Steve Ballmer. So when I actually add my UTM interest as React, it has now personalized for React. But if I just remove this now, it actually remembers the fact that I like React. So when I come back now to this website or go to other pages and do some stuff or add some other actions, I can keep personalizing and this just remains because it knows this about me now. But the interesting bit here is that it goes over the edge, right? So this is extremely fast loaded. I'm clicking Command R here, but you don't see a difference. And if I turn off my JavaScript, it still works. But this is a dynamic personalization, but without JavaScript, it actually works. And so now when I would say, let's do my interest is Vue. Beam, my Vue came in. And now when I remove this, it's still Vue. turn off my JavaScript, still view. And so this is like, it's a very simple example, but this is highly dynamic, freaking fast page loads. And now it knows I like view, and that's where you see this. And so you can actually check this out here, right? We have a little debug tool where you can see these things. So when I actually say clear, it goes back to the default. And so you can actually do like a bunch of tests where you say, okay, I'm going to do React with a strength of 53. And there it is. And so you can kind of play with that, and you can, well, this is a simple example, but you can go really deep. And so that's actually what I wanted to show at the moment. Like this is just, it's kind of a fun, different flavor of the Jamstack. It's highly dynamic. And imagine if you wanted to do SSR on the edge, that could also work, and then have personalization and have some pages actually static. And so this is what I wanted to show you, and I'm very excited about the future of the Jamstack and our composability. And so if you want to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter on Tim Bennix, or you can go to my YouTube channel where I talk about this stuff all the time. Or if you actually like what you saw about Uniform, you can come to our Discord and you can grab this QR code or grab it from the URL uniform.to/Discord, and we can help you out. You can test stuff. We're all there. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon in person. Cheers.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. I really hope you got some value from that. And by the way, if you want more where that came from, we want to invite you to be a part of our community. Go to composability.dev and register today. If you've already registered, you know what I'm talking about. And by the way, if you're on Twitter at all, go to JavaScript Jam and follow us. Why? Because every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we go live. Yeah, live on Twitter Spaces. And you can join us and be with us there while we're live. Heck yeah. You know what? And it doesn't matter if you're a beginner or you've been doing this forever. We love everybody being involved. We bring so many people up to the stage. We have so many great conversations. We want you to be a part of it. All right. We'll see you there.